In 1962, the world was headed into a turbulent decade of failed war and social upheaval, where men were no longer men and women were doing crazy things like getting jobs and keeping their maiden names. It was the perfect time for an escapist film series about a homicidal, muscled Scotsman who keeps the world safe from disfigured masterminds. Dr. No was the first in the line of 26 James Bond films starring the actor all other Bonds would have to live up to, Sean Connery in his pre-Zardoz glory. With beautiful women, flame-throwing tanks, and ruthless murder in the name of empire, this film is the perfect twin billing with Pride and Prejudice. I'm kidding. They check for Y chromosomes at the box office before letting people in. We're a couple of dudes, former little boys who thrilled to the possibilities of a license to kill, so we thought we'd go back to the film that started it all and see how the original holds up. Mix yourself a vodka martini and shake that bad boy. It's time for episode 82 of Toasting the Classics, Dr. No. Welcome to Toasting the Classics, the podcast where we take something that people call a classic and we drink something inspired by the classic and then decide if it's still a classic. We are 1-0 in the last one because we just pronounced the book, Dr. No, to be a classic. Ian Fleming is happy in his grave because of what Toasting the Classics has done in this last episode. So we are doing a rare back-to-back, and I don't mean back-to-back like in the same day. We would never do that because we drink out. We might end up tipsy if we did things back to back. But back to back thematically, because we did Dr. No, the book, and now we're doing Dr. No, the film. And I want to let everybody know somehow I have managed to not imbibe either of these things in the past. I've not done Dr. No, the book, and I've never seen Dr. No, the film. I don't know how that's possible. My name is Dave McArthur.
My name is Clint Lanier. And you know the word imbibe comes from the French word imbiber, which means to soak into. So when you imbibe something, you are soaking it in. By the way, you know what? And we never say this. We always joke about 5 listeners and this and that. I don't know how many listeners we have, but thank you to those who do listen. I just did a podcast that I will have to tell you about next time because it's not coming out for another 4 weeks. But I just did a podcast concerning my new book that came out called Ted Mack and America's First Black-owned
You did a podcast. You cheated on me and did some other podcast.
Well, I was a guest on. I've been a guest on a few podcasts now, but this is a fairly prominent podcast, and that host went out and listened to a couple of our podcasts. Really liked them. And this particular guy, this guy is kind of esoteric himself. But right. So a little bit of love for our podcast.
Well, speaking of getting some feedback from the listeners, I want to say this early in the pod, and I always say it in the outro, but send us an email at toastingtheclassics@gmail.com. Let us know what you what do you want to hear from us? What do you think of what we're doing? Are you guys having fun listening to the pod? Do you drink when you listen to the pod? Do you not want to? It's fine. You don't have to. I'm curious about how people are taking it in. Do you listen on a run? Do you listen on a drive? Whatever.
And although he said you don't have to drink, I think drinking improves the experience, especially if you listen to it.
I can tell you because we have had some birthday parties for children, Clint and I, and Clint is way harder to deal with when you're not drinking. I just want to let everybody know that. So
that's true. No, I mean, but that fight with Chuck E. Cheese, he deserved it.
Dr. No, the film.
Dr. No, the film. That's what we're doing this week.
Starring, according to my notes, someone named Sean Connery. I hadn't heard of this gentleman, but he's very handsome and very muscular. He seems like a movie star. I think he's going to be big one day.
Maybe one day you will have heard of him. Right. This is Sean Connery's breakout role. Had you ever watched?
No. Sean Connery's breakout role was Darby O'Gill in The Little People.
That was in particular a very good movie.
I don't remember, but when I was a little kid, we got cable. And we had the one premium channel, the Disney Channel. My parents paid like an extra $10 a month to get the Disney Channel, which I loved them for. Channel 65 on the local DC cable network. And they played, you would not believe how often they played Darby O'Gill and the Little People. It was like...
that might have been his first film. I don't know if it was.
I think it is actually his first movie. No, he's in The Longest Day. No, Longest Day is closer to this, right? Longest Day.
Yeah, so The Longest Day came out in 1962. Right?
Oh, 62, okay.
So Darby O'Gill came out in 1959. Longest Day came out in 1962. Okay. This movie came out in 1962 as well. How about that? And he was, I mean, he had really a bit part in The Longest Day, which is, I will say, that's
Certified
right.
hood classic, according to
Yeah,
Toasted.
that's it. Great movie, and he has an absolute bit part. But this one was, it was his breakout kind of role. I mean, Sean Connery. If you ask anybody who is more than like 22 years old,
I
what is
mean,
Sean
it's
Connery known for? And they'll say
break,
James
but
Bond.
break, yeah, exactly. Breakout role. It's like saying Harrison Ford got a little bit of a break playing Han Solo. I mean, it's kind of an
Yeah,
understatement, you know. Is that
yeah, well,
breakout
right.
role? This is the role.
Yeah, this is the role. Yeah,
This is maybe the breakout role of all time. Like
I think so. I think
we
so.
did
Well,
48
and when
hours. We did 48 hours with Eddie Murphy, and it was like, that's a breakout role. Harrison
yes,
Ford in Star Wars is a breakout role. Sean Connery embodying James Bond and creating the James Bond franchise
yes, yes.
single-handedly is a breakout role. I mean, it just stands aside from anything else that you would call a breakout role. It's a big deal.
So there have been, I believe there have been six James Bonds, six people who have played
All
James
right, all
Bond
right.
in
Let's
years,
talk about this. So we've got Sean Connery, we've got
right?
Roger Moore, obviously.
Roger
We've
Moore,
got
uh-huh.
Timothy Dalton, Pierce
Timothy
Brosnan,
Dalton.
Daniel Craig, and George Lazenby. Is there another one?
There you go. No, that's it. That's it. I was
Six.
wondering if you were going to get George Lazenby, but
I
you did.
figured that's why I saved it for last. I was looking. I saw
Yes,
the look on your
yes,
face. You were waiting to be able to tell me
yeah.
about George Lazenby, and I no,
So
I
there's
know.
six of them, but they're all compared to Sean Connery. He was the first guy, right? And that's sort of what happens. Always have to have a first, and he
But
was the
that's a
first, right?
but that's a really good point because Christopher Reeve stopped playing Superman. Other people have played Superman. Nobody ever thinks about Christopher Reeve. I
I
mean,
think
you're
I
like,
think
did you
some
like
people
Christopher?
do.
Did you like Michael Keaton as Batman? Yeah, sure I did. But I accept Christian Bale as Batman.
Yeah,
He's great.
but what
This
about
one
Adam West?
to me, yeah, well, exactly. Well, there is Adam West is before that, so maybe that's
Right,
a part of it. But to me, like you're living up to Sean Connery when you play James
right,
Bond.
right, right.
Like it's not. It's like if somebody else played Indiana Jones in another movie. It'd be a
So
long time.
I guess we can start with a that this is going to be basically be a Sean Connery love fest. At least it is for me.
I'm a
At
fan.
31 years old, when he took on this role, he is one of the coolest people ever. I mean, he really is.
Yep.
He is so frigging cool. I mean, the guys
Except
between
apparently Terrence Young had to take him out on the town in London and teach him
yeah,
how to be cool.
I guess he
In
was kind of
swinging.
a bit of a bumpkin.
I don't know if you got into Sean Connery's bio because I actually didn't do it. Is he Irish or Scottish? What's the
He,
story?
oh, he's Scottish. He loves
He's
Scotland.
Scottish, right?
Yeah, yeah. He's part
Sean
of the
Con-
whole Scottish independence movement.
but Sean Connery's a very Irish name.
Well, I think
Am I wrong
we
about
can
that?
we
Or is
can
there something
no.
I'm
I mean, we can go back and forth on that. He hails from Scotland, a family legacy in Scotland. He's very much of the independent Scotland movement. He was famous for having a big tattoo when he was like 70.
okay. So this is
Uh,
this is very similar to a lot of people in Britain. He is of Irish descent,
right. Okay.
but he's from Scotland. He is mostly
Okay.
Scottish. This is a lot like I was actually looking this up the other day because I was thinking Morrissey's Scottish. Oh, sorry,
Hmm.
Morrissey is Irish.
Irish. Right. Yeah.
Grew up in England and is considered
Hmm.
very English and considers himself very English, but his last name is an Irish last name.
Mm.
And I was thinking that I was like, well, wait a minute, isn't Ed Sheeran? Isn't he Irish as well? And yeah, he's also of Irish descent, but lived in England because
Hmm.
it's like America. People move around the United
Right.
Kingdom. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like they go from
Well,
place
and
to
they and
place.
they
So,
and they have been for hundreds of years. I
and
mean,
they
that
have
one in
been for hundreds of
particular.
years, more importantly. Right. Exactly. So he's both, I
Yeah.
guess is the answer to the question. So
Well, he identifies as Scottish. So, there you are.
definitely Scottish.
Yeah. But he just exudes something that I don't think any of the others have until Daniel Craig, and we can talk about that. Let's talk about the film.
Sean
Uh,
Connery has this je ne sais quoi, which is a French phrase that means
I don't know what.
Clint wants to hook up with him.
Is that what it
So
is? Yeah, maybe
yeah,
that's
it
that's
means
it.
Clint
Yeah,
is gay for this person. That's what je ne
yeah.
sais quoi means.
Perhaps, yeah.
So,
He's on my list. Let's put it that
yeah.
way.
What's the thing where people have a list where I
I
can't
think it's a
remember?
hall pass. I think that's what it's
Yeah,
called.
hall pass. There you go. You
Um,
got a hall pass for Sean Connery. There you go. So
I only have a small amount of ice, so I'm going to make our drink right now.
okay, let's do it.
The drink in particular, can anybody guess? So if anybody can try to guess what our drink might be, it happens to be a dry martini. So I'm throwing ice in a shaker. I'm putting about an ounce and a half of Smirnoff vodka, which is very important that it's Smirnoff. Tell you why in a bit. And the ratio of a dry martini is 5-1 vodka over dry vermouth, which is the mixer here. And some people would argue that's too much. Winston Churchill famously said that it should be dusted. That's not the term he used, but barely any dry vermouth at all. So essentially vodka and ice. And you shake this, because it's shaken, not stirred, as we know, and then you strain it out. It should be garnished with a lemon peel, which they talk about in the movie. And it's really just the essence of the lemon that you want here, which is what the peel has. The peel has all the oil. So you kind of squeeze it over your glass, rub it on the rim, and you can drop it in there, and voila, you have a dry martini. People disagree about how dry, again, it should be. I put about a couple of drops of vermouth in.
And what am I putting into it? What are my proportions?
Well, I just told our lovely audience that it's about 5-1 vodka over vermouth, dry vermouth. Some people actually just coat the lip of it or coat the inside of the glass with vermouth, and that's it. Very famously, there's a bar. Oh, what's the name of the bar at the Ritz in New York? Is it Harry's New York Bar? Whatever
There
it's
is a
called.
Harry's New York bar. Well, no,
Yeah, I think
no, Harry's New York bar is in Paris, isn't it?
yes, but they have one at the Ritz
Oh,
at
okay.
the south end of Central Park. And what they do is they pour vermouth into the glass, swish it around, dump it out, and then pour the vodka shaken over ice into that glass. And that's as mixed as they get. Okay. They never really talk about it in the films. It's vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. A martini is 5-1 vodka over
And where do
vermouth.
you land on the controversy about whether or not shaking and stirring actually means anything?
So shaken will give you more water. It'll give you a more watered down martini, but it'll also be a lot colder. At that particular bar that I just mentioned, it has like a layer of ice on top of it. They
Which,
shake it.
which, which, by the way,
Harry,
I could walk to after the show if
yeah,
I were so
you
inclined.
should. Yeah, you should. That means that you live in a very nice part of New York.
I live on the park. Basically, you're talking about something that's on the other side of the park for me. So it would be a hale and hearty stroll, but I could take a
Yeah,
stroll down there. I mean, it'd be
that would
a
be a fun stroll.
2 mile walk, I
And
guess.
then around the corner from that, I will say there's a great bar. What is it called? Jack
I don't know.
Dempsey's. Is Dempsey's still there?
I don't know.
It should be to the east around from the Ritz there.
By the way, if I'm not in trouble with my wife tonight, I promise I will go ahead and check that bar out. That sounds like fun.
Okay.
I'll go have a drink there.
And it
That
should
sounds
have,
like a good mission to go
a
on.
really well chilled martini should have a thin, super thin layer of ice on the top. It's fantastic. If you are just listening to the podcast, I highly recommend you listen to our previous podcast, which was the book Dr. No by Ian Fleming. And we tried to really just talk about the book. Now we're going to talk about the film. And obviously in this one, we're going to talk about the differences between the book and the film and kind of use that as a springboard to talk about the films generally.
Right.
Yeah.
We're talking about the first James Bond film.
Right.
So we're talking about not only the difference between the book and the film, but also the differences between, to me, the differences between this film and the rest of the series and how it sets up the rest of the series. So there were a lot of things I was thinking about with that. For instance, we open up with the music. It's the real James Bond music, but the opening is weak. And then you get the bass line, which I'm like, okay, the bass line is legit the James Bond theme. But the opening music is kind of lame. It's too much
horns.
Too much horns. Yeah, exactly. Too jazz. Too much jazz.
And I think that was kind of ode to the time. So this came out in 1962. Yeah. As David said, it was the first movie James Bond franchise. How many movies have there been? Do you know off the top of your head?
That is a really good question. So it's like 24?
26.
Okay.
Close. Right. This is the one that kind of started them all. Made in 62. So Ian Fleming was still alive when this was made. He died in 64 at 56 years old, by the way, which is very young.
He was young. He was young because he drank too much.
Well, he drank too much? He died of heart disease. They knew nothing about they didn't know a lot about blood pressure and things like that back then.
They didn't understand that a spy probably shouldn't drink 4 cocktails a day. Getting in fights.
That's in the morning, by the way.
By the way, we didn't mention this in the book, and we should have. But when he shows up and he meets Quarrel, we didn't talk about Quarrel at all. We're gonna have to talk about him a lot.
We'll talk
version. But when he meets him, he's like, "Oh, I really want you to help me get into shape." And Quarrel's like, "Yeah, sure." He has a week to get into shape, and he's
Yes, yeah,
drinking the whole time. And
yeah,
I'm like, this is not how you get in shape. This is not one of these like
right.
this is
Well,
not one of
there's a
these
there's
Rocky
a point.
movies, you know.
There was a point there where he had like he was waiting for somebody in the book. He was waiting for somebody for like an hour, and so in that time he had three like
Yeah.
bourbons on the rocks.
Yep.
I was like, God bless you,
Yep.
for doing that. Um,
Fighting for his life against Dr. No, and he just keeps pounding cocktails while
yeah,
he's in. It's
right,
just
right.
wow, okay.
Summary of the movie, it was same as the film. You've got a situation where an agent goes missing in Jamaica, and James Bond is assigned to go and find out what's going on.
First
His,
difference.
Mhm.
They are not Chigros that kill the MI6
They're they're they're
operatives.
they're
They're
just
they're
Jamaicans.
actual Jamaicans that make sense.
Jamaicans.
Yeah. So by
And
the
I
way,
don't know if
his
I don't know
his
if
word, not mine.
I don't know if how many people would recognize what a Chigro is. Do you want to
Yeah,
define
I
that for
don't
them?
I don't really want to explain it, but
Oh,
in
you
the
brought it
book,
up.
they're prominently called Chigros, and they're just regular African descent Jamaicans in this film.
Yes.
So
So a Chigro in the book, since you won't say it, I will. Chigro in the book is a Chinese and a black person, but he doesn't use the word black.
no,
He uses another
right.
word, combines
Rhymes
the two
with
words.
rhymes with Chigro.
It rhymes with Chigro. So there you
Yeah.
go. And he makes the whole industry out of these particular people.
There's something missing from the opening to this film that is classic to the James Bond films, especially
Okay.
later on in the series. The cold open. You
Right.
always, and it's
Right.
it's exactly what Indiana Jones does, which is you open up with not completely unrelated to the rest of the storyline, but essentially like an in medias res. James
Hmm.
Bond is in danger doing something, and then it
Hmm.
ends, and then you get the theme, and then we get the main movie. Like Goldeneye is the classic one to me. It opens
Hmm.
up, and he's got that where he's going after the dam with all the Russians, and he fights them,
Right.
and he jumps off, and then it goes da 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 da.
Yeah.
And you see the shot at and this just opens up with the jazz music, and then the guy at the end of the tunnel shooting at the camera,
Right.
and the
Hmm.
blood comes down, and then it's
Hmm.
just James Bond being James Bond doing James Bond stuff.
Sort of, but they open with the what has become the classic opening for a James Bond film. So James
Okay.
Bond, they open with this really fancy gambling club in London. Can't remember what it's called. It's a
Right.
French name. The camera sort of pans through this club until it rests on a table, which is they're playing baccarat, but it's all in French. La Banque, and you see this hot chick by certain standards.
Offensive language,
Yes,
Clint.
you see this particular woman sitting
You see
across from
this,
him.
you see this physically.
Yeah.
The standards of beauty that most people apply to people
Uh-huh.
that identify as female
Right. Yes.
apply to
Yes.
this woman.
And in another movie, she would have been called Lotta Vagina.
Right.
But in
Is
this,
it Pussy Galore that opens the movie?
it's not Pussy Galore. It's something Trench. I can't remember her name.
Oh, you're
Um,
right. You're right. I think I wrote it down. It was ridiculous. It was the first ridiculous. I didn't write it down, but I was definitely thinking about it. It was like Sylvia Trench or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was it was
bad. It's bad. It's not as bad as Honey Child Rider, but
Honey Child Rider.
or Pussy Galore, but it's pretty
Right.
bad.
It's
Pretty
pretty
bad
bad.
name.
So,
Yeah.
and anyway, so there's this card game going on, and it's obvious that the woman is getting annoyed because she keeps losing, and they refuse to show the face of the person that she's playing against in baccarat. Everybody's gathered around him because it's a high stakes game. There's a lot of suspense going on.
Have you ever played Baccarat, by the way?
I have, yeah, I have in the casino. Yeah, it's
I
fun.
played it in the casino one time just because of James Bond, and it's pretty much like blackjack. You take a card and you have to end up on the highest number you possibly can as your
Right.
second digit. So, in other words, you want to end up with a nine. Nine is the winning.
Baccarat, and then like two other games, they have higher stakes than like blackjack.
Okay.
So blackjack might be $20, say at the Bellagio. Baccarat will be like 40 or 50 a hand because it takes longer. I mean, the game actually takes longer than the others because you'll push, you'll tie, and you do that quite frequently because you have to win by a certain amount or something. I mean, there's various
Yeah.
rules to it.
I think it's
And
kind of ridiculous how they set up, and they deal with this in Casino Royale, but it's ridiculous how they set up James Bond as being this badass because he
yeah,
plays for such high stakes. And I'm like, he's not paying for that from his
yeah.
salary. Like he's not
Well,
that much.
he
And
would have
then
made
and in
by
Casino
today's
Royale,
standard,
In the
He
Daniel
went
Craig
with
Casino Royale,
35
they do
grand.
it that they're like, the British taxpayers are paying for you to drop
Hmm.
£1 million on this
Yeah,
hand. So
he has to find
chill out.
sponsors. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because Vesper
So,
Vesper is definitely upset about that. But
but that scene leads to one of the most famous lines in any movie ever in the
okay,
history of cinema, which is, "Do you mind if we raise the stakes, Mister?" And then it finally pans to this guy wearing the sleekest tuxedo in the entire world,
right.
and he doesn't answer her right away. Instead, he puts a cigarette in his mouth and he lights a cigarette and he tells her with a sneer, "Bond, James Bond."
Yep.
You know, in other words, I'll get to you when I want. Instead, I'm going to do something I want to do. And oh, by the way, here's my name. Use his real name, as you mentioned, is kind of stupid. I'm a
Right.
spy, and here's my name.
Bond, James Bond, working
James
for
Bond.
MI6 and spying on
Yeah,
people. Oh, I
yeah.
shouldn't have said
And
that out loud.
here's
Yeah.
here's my number, and here's my address if you ever want to come by, which she does. I think that was voted the number one line of any movie by British UK film industry, which doesn't surprise you, right?
Yeah, well, that's
But it's
biased.
but it's also but it's also like the top 50 lines in the US too. Bond,
Top
James Bond.
50. Top 50. But you're telling me James Bond beats out May the Force be with you? Come on, that's ridiculous.
Well, I didn't say it was a top one,
No.
but even in America, and how many people have spoofed that? Bond, James Bond. I mean,
Right.
in any case, that's the opening to this, and then it introduces you to this guy. And the dude's cool. I mean, he just
No, he's
exudes
very cool.
Sean
He's very
Connery
cool.
doing that. He just exudes cool. I don't know, Sean Connery has this kind of menace about him, like in his face, a bit of a sneer, a bit of like, I don't,
Do you know the word?
I'm not happy go lucky dude,
Do you know
you
the
know?
word insouciant?
No, I don't, I'm not familiar with that.
It's
I'm not
like
learning
being
enough.
it's like being Fonzie. It's like not given a you know what. Like that
Oh, okay.
there's just a cool to the guy where he's
How
just
do you
kind of like,
spell that?
yeah,
Is that with a Z?
INSOUCIANC, sorry, CE. That's insouciance, the quality of being insouciant. But
Yeah, I
write
think
us an
Alex.
email, let me know if I got that right, because I'm not sure.
Yeah, so there is that about him, but there's also a cruelness to him that just,
Yeah, there is
none of the
definitely.
others. That was the problem that I always had with Pierce Brosnan. He wasn't cruel enough. Pierce Brosnan is a very pretty man.
No, literally, my only problem with Pierce Brosnan is he's too skinny.
He's skinny, he has
Doesn't
big
look
hair,
right.
he
Yeah, he's
has
got
big
big
hair,
hair. He's too
and
skinny. But I actually think Pierce Brosnan seemed like the kind of guy that would maybe kill you and not care. He seemed
I don't know.
like a like a
he's too nice for it. Now Timothy Dalton is the other side. He looks too cruel for it, right?
I actually thought Timothy Dalton was a good Bond. I thought he got a
I
like a bad thought he got a bad shake because he's in two bad movies. He's in two
Yeah,
bad Bond movies.
terrible movies. But like
Um,
for me, like those two were at the opposite ends of the spectrum.
yeah.
The rest of them kind of fall in the middle somewhere. I thought Sean Connery, George Lazenby, believe it or not, were sort of the in the middle somewhere. And I thought that Sean Connery was more towards the cruel end. Like he was pretty, but not too pretty. He was more masculine, rugged,
Yeah,
and
no, he's not. Yeah.
but not as much as Tim
Have
Dalton, and not pretty. And then George Lazenby is like the everyman guy. And then Daniel Craig, I don't know where Daniel Craig falls in it, but
That's a
but
good question.
to me, Tim Dalton and Pierce Brosnan were at the opposite ends of the spectrum, pretty and cruel, and then the other guys kind of fell in the middle
Have you
somewhere.
ever seen the movie Zardoz?
Zardoz. Oh no, I don't think I have.
It's Sean Connery, and he lives in this future where there's two types of people. There's
I've seen stills from this. Is this where he's
okay,
wearing
okay.
chrome? He's wearing chrome, right?
I don't know if
He's
he's
like
wearing.
wearing like chrome like suspenders and like weird
No, I don't know.
clothes.
Unless I'm remembering, I might be mixing up his outfit when he's playing Ramirez in Highlander with what he looks like in Zardoz. He's supposed to be like the epitome of animal masculinity, and it's just he's getting a little long in the tooth to be that. But it's like you could see why they chose Sean Connery for the role. But anyway, so
Yes,
kind
no, that
of
that's it.
respect.
He's got red suspender G string. with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hip high
Right.
boots.
There
Yeah,
you go. Yeah.
it wasn't chrome. Sorry, it was
No, no,
red.
not Chrome. Yeah.
Red.
He looks,
Everybody needs to go out and just Google that image.
yes, Google
Zardoz,
him and Zardoz.
1974. This is the height of 1974 with hip high boots, a G string, a red G string with suspenders, cross suspenders.
So
Anyway, so
how's Doctor No the film different from Doctor No the book?
oh God, how do I count the ways?
I mean, we all know
So
Sean Connery is Bond. I mean, I think we could
uh,
belabor it, but he's the Bond. I mean, he's great.
he is Bond.
And
Yeah,
he's in
he's
Doctor
Bond.
No,
Mhm.
Goldfinger, From Russia with Love. Help me out here. He's in Thunderball, right?
Thunderball.
And
I think you only live twice,
yeah, okay.
and Never
And
Say
then he's
Never
in
Again.
Never Say Never Again, which was a
Yeah,
remake. That's
right.
actually 10 years after Zardoz, if you can
Yes.
imagine. That's in
Yeah.
83, I think, that he
Yeah.
said
He
that.
was talk about long in the tooth. He was Bond for quite a while. Roger Moore took over.
Right.
Roger Moore.
But Lazenby's
Uh,
in between, right?
Lazenby's in between in Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Okay. That's what I
And
was
he was
wondering.
supposed to be the Bond. He messed up a lot of personal issues and messed up,
Well, he
got
was
a massive,
Australian.
well, right. So, but he was
What are you going to
good. I
do?
mean, he was really good in that movie.
Yeah, I think he's a
And
pretty good Bond, actually.
he would have been a good Bond, but personally, his personal life kind of exploded afterwards
Okay.
and with the fame and stuff. And so they're like, okay, never mind. He's a wreck. Let's get somebody else. So they got Roger Moore, who would have been fine, but the writing for it became much more tongue in cheek.
So
He became,
minor big surprise for me with reading the book Doctor No is I looked at the list of books that came out before, and I would have never guessed that Moonraker came
yes,
before
right,
Doctor No in the
right,
series
yeah,
because to
yeah,
me Moonraker is the epitome of cheesy James Bond movie, right?
1970s, yeah,
I actually really
yeah,
liked that movie
yeah,
when I was a
yeah.
kid, but that is a corny movie. And I
Yes,
figured that's got to
yes,
be they must have written that in the 70s, right?
right.
That has 70s, but it's not. That was written in the 50s. It's weird.
So did From Russia with Love, did that come out before Doctor No? I can't remember.
What are you talking, book or film?
Yeah, book.
It's the immediate one that precedes Doctor No, the book. It's the fifth James
Precedes or
Bond novel.
proceeds?
Precedes.
Okay. So that was the
From
next
Russia with Love
movie.
is the fifth novel.
Okay, so that was the
Leads
movie
into
after Doctor
right.
No. With this movie, kind of like what we did with the book Doctor No, we're sort of analyzing the movies of James Bond, not
Yeah, a
just
little bit.
this
A little
movie.
bit. A little bit. Yeah.
So for the book,
Although I have to say, I was in a position where I had to use Doctor No the book
uh
to judge the whole series because I've never read any of the other books.
yeah, yeah.
I've seen most of the Bond movies. I'm probably missing a couple, but I have seen quite a few of these. So I
Well,
haven't
and it's unlike the book. So the book did evolve, or I'm sorry, did not evolve. The movies did. So,
definitely.
which they have to do anyway. I mean, they made the books between 52 and he died in 64. He
Something
died
like
fairly young. There was a couple of books made posthumously, and then there were, you know, writers hired afterwards to write in the same style. But for the most part,
yeah,
the
that's right.
movies,
That's right. Yeah.
because the movies take longer to make, they sort of evolved with the times.
This is an interesting question right here. Let's see what you can do with this. And don't cheat. Okay.
Okay.
But if you're adjusting to modern money,
Mhm.
right? What would you
Okay.
say was the biggest James Bond film in terms of earnings?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to cheat, but I know that Doctor No, they only spent $1 million. Well, a million
Oh, I don't mean
pounds
profit. I'm not talking about profit. I'm talking how much money it earned at the box. Yeah,
at the box office.
in terms of profit, I think Doctor No is a smash hit.
How
But
much did it earn? I would say one of Daniel Craig's. I'd say maybe Casino Royale, perhaps, or I can't remember the name of the ones after something fall.
according to if adjusted to 2005
Uh-huh.
dollars in earnings,
Uh-huh.
Skyfall is the
Skyfall, that was the one. Yeah,
number
that was the
one
one.
Bond
Yeah,
movie
that
of
was the
all
one I
time.
was thinking.
And by the way, that's the correct answer because that's probably the best Bond movie. I would say Skyfall is the
Yeah,
best Bond film. But
that's a good movie. That's
In
a really
terms
good
of
movie.
Sean Connery's movies,
Uh-huh.
it's a weird answer. It's
Okay.
Thunderball. Oh,
Thunderball. Okay.
sorry. I didn't mean to ruin it for you. But
So it is
Thunderball.
Thunderball. Okay.
I'm not even
Thunderball.
sure. I know Thunderball has sharks in it, but I don't
Yes.
know if I've ever seen Thunderball. And Thunderball was remade. Isn't Never Say Never
Yes.
Again a remake of
It-
Thunderball?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Thunderball has a weird history. So, okay. So Saltzman and Broccoli, those are the producers, who bought the rights uh, for all of James Bond's, all of the rights for James Bond from Ian Fleming
right.
for £50,000.
Yeah, and they still make money off
Can
it
you
today.
imagine?
Yeah, that's a
Oh my
good deal.
God. Yeah, that's a great deal. But there was one movie, okay? And that was a movie that was it was Thunderball. And so
Uh,
what happened was Ian Fleming decided that they were going to make they're going to make a movie out of James Bond. And so they wanted an original movie. And so he made this movie Thunderball with another writer. I can't remember that guy's name off the top of my head, but this is like in the 50s. They never made the movie, but Fleming said, I'm going to go ahead and make the book based on my script. So the other writer, because Fleming was not a script writer, so, or a screenwriter rather, so he hired somebody, to help him. That guy sued Fleming because he said, hey, you can't use what I helped write for one of your books. So they settled. Fleming said, I will get all the credits for a book. You get all the credits for a movie if you want. And he must have done that thinking that would never happen. Like they would never make a
uh,
movie out of it. Well, that guy hung on to it. So it's kind of like imagine if Harry Potter, like all the Harry Potter books, but one was owned by J.K. Rowling, and that
yeah.
one book, and they made the movie, all the movies, but one movie would not be made by them. It would be made by another studio, by another, set of writers, everything else. That's sort of what happened with Thunderball.
Okay.
So it was part of the canon. It was part of the universe, and it was part of sequentially in the books. It was part of that, uh, but it was owned and it was made by somebody else. So that's why, like,
So that's why you could remake it.
that's why you can remake it because the people who owned Thunderball they remade it is the exact same movie, but it was Never Say Never Again, like '84 or something like that. No, Never Say Never Again. Well, Thunderball
Oh,
was okay.
I thought I liked Never Say Never. I don't remember it, but I remember
Well,
liking it.
he
But
was he was wearing a hairpiece. I mean, it was that bad.
well,
Sean Connery was. I think Sean Connery went bald prematurely. One of those guys that just sort of happened to his body
yeah,
and his skull
yeah.
cap kind of never kept track of each other.
To get back to this particular film,
Yeah,
what other things did you notice that were changed? So one thing I noticed that was changed from the film, sorry, from the book to the film, was the secretary. There were two people that get murdered at the beginning of the book: the
right.
diplomat and the secretary.
Strange ways
And
and yeah,
the whole thing is everybody's like, oh, he must have run off with her because she was this real dish. And then they
yeah.
show in the film they show the secretary and she's like an old lady. And I'm like, what? And then everybody's
Right.
like, oh, he probably ran off with her. She's a real babe. I'm like, I'm sorry, is this a 1962 thing? Because there was an old lady playing this part. I don't really understand what's going on here. Like,
That's
I'm not
exactly
I'm
right.
not buying this.
Yeah,
I don't
I
think he
know.
I
Yeah.
don't think he ran off with Maud from like accounting. It doesn't seem
Well, and then Professor Dent in the movie actually makes a
uh,
reference to that. He's like, well, his secretary is a real dish.
they did a thing where they had it so it was going to dazzle and I can't topple. They topple the rockets with interference in order so that Dr. No had like a motive, and it doesn't really
Hmm.
appear in the book. Dr. No has a motive. He's going to topple the rockets and then hold people ransom, essentially, get money to not topple the rockets. And and that kind of makes sense. Okay, fair
Right.
enough. And I thought it was just they involved Cape Canaveral and stuff like that. I thought it was just sort of to make the movie more plausible to Americans. But one of the clever things they did in the script was there's a launch that's going to
Right.
happen in
Right.
12 hours, which gives a clock when James Bond lands on Crab
Hmm.
Key. He's got a clock where he has to beat the clock to get to this thing. And I'm like, that's
Right.
perfect screenwriting. That's like
Yeah.
screenwriting 101. You need a
Yeah.
clock. Everybody's got
Yeah.
to be, you can't just be like milling around and like,
Yeah.
oh, we'll get to dealing with these rockets when we get to dealing with these
Yeah.
rockets. You
Right.
need
Right.
things are going to blow up if you don't deal with it by a certain
Yeah.
time because you have to have that in a film. I think a lesson for anybody who's interested in how to write a movie, like that's what you
Yeah.
need to do. So the photographer lady was the only one I thought that actually looked like she was part Asian.
You mean part Asian, not just Asian.
Part Asian, part Asian. Because
I
there's a
see. I see.
definitely I would
Yeah.
say, and Ursula Andress notwithstanding, best looking woman in this movie is
Uh-huh.
the one that lives in the bungalow in the mountains that he goes up there with.
Miss Taro, I think
I
is
don't
her name.
remember what her name was. Is that what it was, Miss Taro?
Yeah, I think so. Taro. Yeah.
Hands down, that's the one that would get
She's
me.
yeah.
That
She's
was
a bit.
that was the honeypot, I'd be in trouble. Like Ursula Andress, I'd be like, whatever. I've seen a blonde. That's they're
Yeah.
dime a dozen. But the girl in the bungalow that'd be the danger for me. I'd have to watch out for that. So
So speaking of the girl in the bungalow, that brings us to the controversial scene
okay,
in this
okay,
movie
okay. Which one?
when he kills Professor Dent.
Yeah, it's a murder.
It's a murder
That is
for
a
sure.
murder. Yeah,
Yeah.
what
He,
is
he
going on there? I wrote that down. I said killing the professor was a bit murdery. And by the
yes.
way,
So
I took
so
a noun. I took a noun and added a Y.
murdery. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you didn't put a G in it. Murdery.
No, I didn't say murdering, but I did say murdery.
so
So I
so
thought
for
he
those
disarmed.
who haven't seen the movie,
Yeah,
it's a great scene. So James Bond has set himself up to be in this kind of house alone with the enemy coming to attack him, and he
right,
knows it. So he's set himself up, and so he's waiting for them kind of as an ambush. And you see him in this dark room. The door opens, and this hand with a gun, juts out of the door, and you hear the thwip of a gun with a silencer on it, put, 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 and it shoots whatever's in the bed, which we all know because we've been watching the movie was nothing but a collection of pillows made into the shape of a person. And so he put, he shoots it, and he empties like five. Yeah, it's important. He empties 5 rounds into the bed. And then
right.
James Bond closes the door and tells the guy to drop it because he's been waiting in ambush the whole time. So the guy drops his gun rather, sits on the bed, and James Bond interrogates him. The enemy, grabs his gun and tries to kill James Bond and goes click. Bond looks at him casually and cruelly. And I mean, this is why I love this movie so much. He looks at him casually and cruelly, and he says, "That's a Smith and Wesson, and you've had
And
your
you've had your
six,
five. Yeah,
or you've had your five, or whatever."
I think
And
he does say
he
six. Yeah.
he in the meantime is holding his Beretta, which was issued to him by M, with a silencer on it.
No, 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 not the Beretta.
It's
It's
the
the Walter.
Walther, yeah. So he's
Yeah.
holding his Walther PPK, silencer on it, and he's like, "That's a Smith and Wesson, and you've had your five." And what a great line! And then
Yeah.
flap, and he shoots the guy. The guy falls over,
Yeah.
okay, dead supposedly. And then what does he
Unarmed.
do? Unarmed.
Unarmed.
And then what does he do?
Shoots him
Shoots him
again.
again.
Yeah, that's
Flap.
so
And
I think we talk I think we
that became a very controversial part of this movie. They're like, "Oh my God, he just killed this guy in cold
right,
blood. Not
right.
only did he kill him, but then he shot him again after he killed him." It's
So
like,
I had this conversation with my dad not too long ago because
wow.
my dad introduced me to the Bond movies when I was a little kid.
Mhm.
And I remember him telling me, "Oh, he says Bond, James Bond, and this is how he walks and this is how he talks and he's really cool and he has a 007 designation, which is a license to kill."
Kill, yes.
Right? And like I remember my dad telling me these facts, and I'm like 7 years old, and I remember being like, license to kill.
You can
On
kill
I
people
was
with a
no, I was
license?
like, no, I was like, awesome. What why did I think that was cool?
Right?
I didn't want to I'd never punched anybody in the face in my life.
Yeah,
Why did I think it was cool to be able to kill somebody and have a
right.
license to do it? But it sounded so cool. And what is the matter with little boys that sounded cool to me? Like
Well, no, no.
really was
What I thought when I was a little kid, I thought you literally had a license. Like you have a
yes,
license,
yes,
okay?
I did too.
And you could go anywhere in the world and
Right.
kill people.
Why did
It's
we
like,
think that was
yeah,
cool though?
but like you could be in Japan, kill
Yeah.
somebody, and be like, no, 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 no.
No, the cops would show up and you'd be like, no, no,
I
no,
have a
no.
license. I have a
Do
license
this.
to kill.
Yeah,
See, yeah. So, oh well, okay, on your way.
exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
it's
I
like,
had the
you
exact
know,
same thought. And I remember
And
I was telling my dad about this, and he was laughing so hard because he had no idea. He was telling me about this as a little kid, and I was like,
right, what would you
I don't know
expect, right?
what kind of psychopath was I as a 6-year-old that was like, awesome,
But
license to
that makes,
kill.
you said psychopath. This is the part that separates James Bond from any normal person.
Right.
I think from then on, for me, like that's something that a psychopath would do. He could not kill the guy because the scene right before this part, he takes the girl and he puts her in the cab with the chief of police, and he says,
Uh-huh.
book her downtown. So they
Right.
put her in jail because she's a
Right.
spy. Okay.
And she spits at him.
And she spits at him and he wipes it off and he's like, whatever.
Which, if I had a license to
And
kill, if there's
I
a
would have just
license to
killed her.
kill,
Right. Yeah.
if there's a
Yeah.
license to kill in Dave McArthur's name, don't spit on me, because that's it.
Can you
That's
imagine?
when I'm using
Can you
that.
imagine Homer Simpson with a license? He would have just killed everybody.
That's when I'm
It's
taking
like,
that. That's when I'm
yeah,
taking
yeah,
my license
right,
for a spin.
right, right, yeah, yeah.
If somebody spits on my face, that's it.
Well,
Forget about
that
it.
the license is coming out, right?
The cops would come after you and they'd be like, "Why did you shoot this woman in the face?" And you'd be
I,
like,
I,
listen,
I
she spit on my face."
and I have
And
a license to kill.
that would probably be enough. Any
Yeah.
reasonable cop, that would be
Oh well,
enough.
geez.
But
Okay.
if it wasn't enough, then you pull out your piece of plastic license to
That's
kill.
right, right, right. Because it would be hard plastic.
Only the
But
British government has access to lamination technology. So
of course.
Yeah.
But my point is, he sends the girl off who tried to kill him twice.
Who is it controversial with? I mean, I had the same thought. Like I said, killing the professor was a bit murdery. I wrote that in my notes. Who is it controversial with? What do you read that somewhere? People were talking about that.
Yeah, no, critics, with film critics. I mean,
okay.
they judged it as like cruel and barbarian, and it was, at the time it was terrible. I don't know. Now it almost seems like.
Well, do you remember the opening of Casino Royale, the cold opening of Casino Royale?
Yes,
Where
yes. I was thinking of that.
He's in the office with the guy, and the guy's like, your second kill is a lot less upsetting, and he's like,
no,
yes,
no, he doesn't. He doesn't. That's exactly what I was thinking of, because the guy does not finish the sentence.
No,
he's like, they say the second kill is less, and then he shoots him.
Yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't finish a sentence, and he's like, yes, consider.
That was the moment. I mean, there's something about this. There's something homicidal about this.
Because
when he does that in Casino Royale, and he's like, yes, considerably, I'm in.
Yes.
I'm like, that's
but
James Bond.
The thing is, Roger Moore wouldn't have done that.
No way.
Pierce Brosnan definitely wouldn't have done that.
Timothy Dalton might have.
But see, the thing is, Timothy Dalton would have done it to the guy's children, and that's the thing about Timothy Dalton. He was so cruel, looking,
Yeah, he looked a little. Feral.
And so, yeah. but they set the stage with James Bond as this guy.
Yeah,
that was not in the book. Okay,
no,
they made that. They made all that part up. But
the
director and the writers and the producers said, this is going to be James Bond is going to be this guy. He's going to be a guy that kills this dude.
Theory of the week.
He didn't.
I think this is actually spot on. It's not really that overwrought, but the willingness to sleep with strange women at the drop of a hat and to kill men at the drop of a hat. Right. And then at the same time to be like wearing a tuxedo and to speak 10 languages and stuff. It's embracing both the impulse to reject civilization and just all these things that hold you back and keep your id in check and keep you from being like a maniac that can kill. And at the same time, you're also this incredibly sophisticated person. It's like those two impulses like embodied in one character. And that's what men, I think. There's not a lot of female fans of James Bond, let's be honest. But a lot of men are watching. They're like, if there just weren't all these things holding me back. If only I had a license to kill.
Yeah, right.
The only thing keeping me from killing is the lack of a license. It's at the same time like an acknowledgement of the animal in us, but also that saying that civilization is what's important. The only reason I don't kill, if I had a license, I could kill people. I don't have a license. That's very British. I'm not gonna kill anyone. I'm not a licensed killer.
With that, though, as he mentioned in the book, he didn't want to. Like, there's a part where
No, he's
Like
totally different in the
like like
book. Totally different in the book.
the bad guys are coming down the trail, and he opens up on them and he kills all of them, and then he tells the girl, I didn't want to do it. I hate doing it, or something like
Right.
that.
I'm very
Something to that
sorry, but I'm going to
effect.
have to kill these guys.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
No.
that.
James
And then
Bond in the film. James Bond in the film is like his attitude would be, "Watch this. I'm going to kill these guys, and then you're going to want to have
right,
sex
right.
with me."
Hold my
Like,
beer. Yeah,
hold
hold
my
my
beer or
martini.
like
No,
murder,
hold my
but like
martini. Yeah, yeah,
indiscriminately murder all these poor natives.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
completely different. You know what it's a lot like. So we've talked about the Indiana Jones connection, and I'm gonna kind of drop it after this. But
Okay.
the moment, and it's everybody's favorite moment in Raiders, when that guy comes after him with the big sword and he's swinging the
And he
great
just
big
shoots
sword,
him. Yeah,
and then he's just like and shoots him.
yeah,
That is a
right.
James Bond moment, and I know
It
it was
is.
improvised. It was
Yes,
improvised by Harrison Ford,
yes,
but it's that devil may care about killing somebody. That's just,
yes,
but in that case, at least it's a guy that wants to kill you. It kind of makes sense,
yes.
But it's the lack of chivalry about killing someone.
Ah,
I'm just gonna kill this guy. This guy's an
well,
inconvenience.
I think we've
He
we've
he
kind
has
of
a sword. It's not really fair that I have a gun, but he wants to kill me, so I'm just gonna put a bullet in him.
I think we've sort of come to a zenith on that with the John Wick stuff. It's just an orgy of killing. And I've seen it. I enjoy John Wick. If anybody's ever seen it, it's like they call it gun fu.
They
Um,
call it gun fu, but John Wick. The thing you have to remember about the John Wick movies is that the wink that the John Wick movies are giving to you at the
mhm.
very beginning is his motivation for killing is the most ridiculous motivation for
Yes.
killing.
Well,
And it is
you steal my car and kill my dog, and
yeah,
then we
fully
will have a
fully
problem.
tongue in cheek. It's fully
Yes.
tongue in cheek, and
Yes.
it's the
Of
same thing we're
course.
talking about. It's like, why do you kill people? Like what these movies are ridiculous.
Yes.
The
Yes, they
idea that you're
are.
killing
Yeah,
people
they
is a
are.
ridiculous thing,
Yes.
that fascinates the male psyche.
Well, we're talking about the movie,
Right.
but so that allows us to talk about sort of all the movies. So do we become a little bit more sophisticated? So, by the time we get to Daniel Craig, they're very nuanced, and he's not killing everybody just to kill them, although he kills them fairly wantonly, those people that deserve it.
Well, we don't really
Yep.
have much of a motivation for his killing. He's a killer. We don't really get much of a sense of why is this guy how has this guy ended up being a killer for the British Secret Service? Like what?
We don't get a backstory, but
No.
they talk many times. I mean, like in the most recent movies, they mention many times that he's like a blunt instrument.
Right.
You
But
know,
why is he a blunt instrument? I'm saying, why is this guy who grew up apparently on some manor estate in northern England?
mm,
Why is he a murderer? Like,
mm,
how did that end up happening? Why does he
yeah,
hate?
no, that's
Why does he have such low morals that he goes around murdering people at the drop of a hat? Like, it's weird.
well,
He's
wouldn't
like,
you? I don't know.
well, apparently, when I was 6 years old, if you gave me a license to kill, I would have been
Right, exactly.
cutting a
But you have to
swath
have
across the
a
earth.
license though. You have to have with
Only
your
if I had a license. I'm not
your
crazy,
picture on it in your name.
but if I had a
Yeah,
license, right? Like
right. Maybe you're not
eyes blue, hair blonde, license to kill,
blonde.
then I
That
apparently I would have been down. In the
copper,
book,
maybe.
James Bond is almost killed by a centipede. In the film, he is almost killed by a tarantula. Do you know why that happened? Why they made that change?
Well, yeah. So you can't do a
No, there's
centipede
a
in your
there's a
film.
historical reason.
Okay, why?
In 1962, and this was a big problem for the film industry, there was a strike among the centipede wranglers in Hollywood.
Shut the hell up. Shut up. Yeah, shut up. It was a
The
lot
great, the
easier.
great centipede wrangler strike of 1962 really
Yeah,
shut down a lot of
yeah.
tropical themed
Okay. All right.
espionage movies.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to do one tarantula. In the book, there's like
Yes.
30 tarantulas. There's like one tarantula.
Wait, where are there are
So
tarantulas in the book, but where does that happen? He has to go through a box, right? He has to reach
yeah,
through a box.
he has to go
Yeah.
through a tarantula box. Yeah.
I mean, the reality is tarantulas are not particularly terrifying. They're
Yeah, not
creepy.
bad.
I have to admit, a tarantula is a pretty disgusting creature, but they're not particularly dangerous. Like
Right.
you can
Well,
pick up a tarantula. It's not a
yeah.
threat.
I mean, they're big spiders, but it's not really a tarantula.
For my honeymoon, because I'm a crazy person, we
Uh,
went to the Amazon, my wife and I, to Manaus, Brazil. And then we went out into the
wow.
Amazon to do like a backcountry camping trip kind of thing. And we went on this canoe ride at night. And we're using
Uh,
like a light to shine around the jungle. And we see
yeah.
caiman, this huge poisonous snake way up in a tree, and all kinds of things. And we go under this log in our dugout canoe. And I look up
Mhm.
and there's a hole in the log over my head, and half hanging out of of the hole in this log is the biggest tarantula I have ever seen in my entire life. I academically know that a tarantula is not a particularly dangerous thing, but I
Right.
remember thinking, if that animal drops out of that hole into this boat, I'm going in the water. I'm not sitting in a canoe with a tarantula that's a foot wide. I'm not doing it. Like I cannot
Regina,
imagine a more terrifying creature.
so Regina and I were in Australia for the first time, and we were
Okay.
in Brisbane, Australia, and we're walking down the street, and at night we're going towards sort of the party district of Brisbane,
There's a
and
surprise. There's a
yeah,
surprise.
I know, right? We hear this like chattering like bats, but it's freaking loud, and I see this thing fly in front of a billboard. And I was like, and I told Regina, I was like, oh yeah, there's giant bats here.
Oh, one of those fruit bats, right?
Yeah, the fruit
Yeah,
bats.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and she's like, and she had no idea, but she didn't do any research. She didn't do research on Brisbane before we got there. And
Okay.
so we're walking down the street, and we are walking under like a bus canopy, you know, like
Okay.
the bus canopies that they typically have in like in Europe and stuff. They have them in Australia too. So it has a
Except in
kind of
Australia, there's a bunch of fruit bats roosting on the top of
yeah,
the.
exactly. So there's no overhang. So we're walking
Yeah.
through it, and we hear this squeaking, and I'm jiding her. I'm like, "Oh, you hear those fruit bats?" And she's like, "Shut up, shut up." And so we walk underneath this canopy. We hear this really loud squeak, and we look up. Both of us look up, and there's this flying fox, man, like 3 feet above us, head down to look straight at us. And she's like, she takes
She was
off.
like, nope,
Yeah, she's
nope,
like, "I'm done."
nope. This is a big question that I should ask.
Yeah.
What do you think of Ursula Andress?
I think she is a terrible actress.
She's
And
horrible, horrible,
yeah, and
horrible.
quite pretty, you know.
They had to play down the whole Tarzan girl thing because she was just so bad at acting. There was all this stuff like the Honey Child Rider character has some interesting aspects to it, but like Ursula Andress was such a bad actress, I think they had to just completely play it down.
She starts out as a strong character, which would
Uh,
make some people happy, but then ends up being, a helpless person.
she's a much more interesting, like strong female character in the book. I thought she's just kind of a bimbo in the movie. Like she's not particularly interesting. I didn't think, she kind of like fights on her own and escape. Like for instance, she does kind of the Princess Leia. She's the one who escapes on her own. Like she doesn't need James Bond to free her in the book. Like she busts out on her own and runs into him. And in the movie, does he even
Well,
or
sort of, but
that
because of
happen off
them.
camera? I don't. A couple of tips for secret agents. First of all,
Mhm.
don't announce your name on the mission. Second of all, don't drink all the time while you're on the mission. Third, when you're sneaking onto an island, right? Like a covert island and you don't want to be shot by machine guns, don't wear a bright red shirt or a bright blue shirt. I feel like what you should wear is like camouflage colors of some kind.
Right. I like
And
that.
in the spirit of giving basic advice to people, if you're writing a movie and you have a fight scene, let's say you have to have a confrontation between the villain and the hero at the end and a fight, don't set it in a decontamination chamber for radiation so that everybody has to be wearing a hood and you can't tell who's
Right.
fighting who. Because for a
Right.
second, I thought one of the mooks threw James Bond into the radioactive pool. I had to
Right.
rewind the fight to be like, oh no, that was the mook that attacked James Bond, and James Bond threw
Right.
him into the pool. And then the other guy that walked up that was wearing a white hood and you couldn't tell who he was Dr. No. Just completely wasted. The actor, the Dr. No actor, by the way, my advice also maybe cast an Asian. I
Hmm.
don't know. I don't know if there were no Asians in 1962, but it's a little
Uh,
weird to have a white dude playing that part. But I feel like Dr. No was a great character. Like the actor's really good. And he's actually
Mhm.
does a really the dinner scene is a really good menacing dinner scene. He gets wasted, he just gets thrown into a pool of radiation. And by the way, I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't tell what that pool was supposed to be. What is that? Why is there a pool?
It's
Is it
radioactive water thing or
but if
something.
it's
I don't know.
radioactive water, everybody's in the room should be dying, right? I guess they were wearing suits, but why would falling in the water be particularly lethal?
Well, even if it wasn't, I mean, just he couldn't, come out because of his hands, right? He couldn't grip with his
Yeah.
when.
Well, no, he
I
had
mean,
like some kind of crushing ability with. There were some kind of bionics, weren't they?
yeah,
So
but I think
he crushes the glass at the dinner
yeah,
scene.
but I think that's sort of the way they made it look is like for some reason he couldn't use his hands to pull himself out.
Another really good example of how they sort of nerfed Honey Child or
Nerf.
Honey,
Uh-huh.
I guess it's Honey, is when they do the
Yeah.
bamboo when they're hiding in the fort
Oh
in the
yes, yes, yes. I
and they use
know.
it's
I
Sean
know.
Con
Yeah.
it's James Bond's idea to use the bamboo. And I'm like, that
So
was
that
one of her best moves
so
in the book.
okay.
And
So
she's the one who comes up with that.
something that we mentioned in the last episode was the James Bond rather in the books. Like he was a human. Like he took suggestions. He
Yeah, he needs
was
like a local
fallible,
girl to tell him how to
and so
escape.
so
Yeah.
in that book, she said, uh, "Honey, child, uh, or
Honey
Honey
Child.
Rider rather, yeah, Honey Child Rider says,
Honey Child Rider.
this is how to escape from the guys. We should take some reeds and some bamboo reeds, and but in the movie, it's all about him." Like James
Yep.
Bond does everything that she tells him to do. But that's one of those things where it's just a difference between the James Bond in the book versus James Bond in the movie.
James Bond in the movie is just has no imperfections. He
Right.
knows everything. He can handle every
Yes.
problem, and I
Yes.
think he's meant as truly escapist male fantasy.
Yeah, I
And
think so.
it's not as bad as there's male fantasy of great big muscle dude, and he's not that bad. There's a little more.
Right.
He's at least like
Right.
escapist male fantasy for an intelligent man.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
still,
Yeah.
it's this is the guy who's in charge all the time and answers all the
Yep.
questions. And I had never seen this film, so my biggest surprise, geez, I have to say one of my biggest surprises is that this film was made on location in Jamaica.
Yeah.
This is
Oh,
actually
that's
what
good.
Jamaica
That's a good
looks
surprise.
like. And
Yeah.
I would have thought that they would have filmed this in Florida on the cheap, but they actually went down to
Mhm.
Jamaica and made this movie, and you get to see what a Jamaican mangrove swamp looks like in a way that's
Right.
pretty true to the book, because the book is kind of like we said, like sort of a travel log. And
Mhm.
I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool to get a look at because I watched it with Alex and he was like, "Oh, is that what Jamaica looks like?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is actually. That's it. You're looking at it right there." Right.
And I guess it my biggest surprise was how closely it followed the book. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that it didn't include,
There's
but
differences. If you're
yeah,
paying attention to intimate details, it's different, but
yeah,
it's pretty close.
for
It's pretty
sure.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I had never watched Doctor No. And I think part of it is because I was aware of the dragon.
Hmm. The dragon. Right.
Stupid idea.
Yeah. Right.
Stupid
Yeah.
idea.
I
The
get you.
idea of
Yeah.
having a tank that drives around the swamp and pretends to be a dragon, which is in the
Right.
book, by the way. It's
It is. Yeah. You're right.
there's fidelity with the book there, but that's just a dumb idea. And so I just kind of thought this movie sucked and I never watched it. I avoided it over the years. I just want to get two quick answers. Favorite Bond film? What's your favorite Bond? This
Yeah.
one is your
This one.
favorite
Yeah.
of
Yep.
all the 26 Bond movies, is your favorite one.
It is. Yep. It's because of that controversial part that I mentioned when he shoots the guy. He didn't have to shoot the guy, but he does. He kills him. Yeah. I love it. I love that part. We're talking 1964 or 1960.
I love the
But
iconic badass moments of James Bond.
yeah.
And that's why that thing I talked about at the beginning of Casino Royale, where he's like, yes, considerably. That's where I was like, I
Yeah.
am all
Yeah.
on board with this Bond.
I don't know why, but that particular part where he says, "That's a Smith and Wesson, and you've entered six," and he shoots him. There's something about that. It separates him from everybody else. because
Yeah.
that had never happened before. And that's why there was controversy. Kind of one-upsmanship. It's like,
Right.
okay, you want to try to kill me? Here you go.
The
Right.
dude
Yeah.
tried to get one up on him, so he puts a bullet in him.
Right. Yeah.
The woman tried to have him killed, and he's like, "Okay, I'll
And
just have you arrested."
at the time, a lot of people were upset about that. To me, that sets the stage.
It's
Okay.
dark.
It is very dark. It sets the stage for how are we gonna do James Bond? This dude's a ruthless freaking murderer,
Yeah.
like you said. Yeah, he can justify what he just
I mean,
did.
I wouldn't have shot the professor in that situation after he'd already fired his bullets and I knew he was at my mercy. But it's really only because I don't have a license. If I
Well, it's all about the
if,
license.
if somebody has given me a license,
Yeah.
forget about it. I'm plugging that
Yeah.
dude. But
Yeah.
are we
Maybe always a
going
place.
to certify this hood classic? What are we doing here?
You know what? It's all up to you, man. This is my thing, so it's all up to you.
I had never seen this one, and I'm a Sean Connery man. I've seen Goldfinger a bunch of times. I think From Russia with Love. So, by the way, we didn't talk about this, but my favorite Bond film is probably Skyfall. I thought it was
Mm,
terrific, and I
yeah,
thought
me
Casino
too.
Royale was almost as
Yeah.
good.
Yep.
And I think I would skip over all the Roger Moores in terms of ranking them.
Yes.
Um, I love From Russia with Love. The villain is terrific. I think From
Yes.
Russia with Love is really good. And I've always been a fan of Goldfinger. Again, the villain is great. And I think Sean Connery is terrific in that movie. I was surprised how much I liked this one. I thought this one was going to be cornball and lame, but I really liked it. And since it's the first film, this is a classic. I mean, I enjoyed it. We watched it, we
Sweet.
liked it. You know,
All
my
right.
son my son was born 48 years after the first James Bond film, and he dug it. So I feel like that's probably worth
Sweet.
more than my accreditation is probably worth less than that because kids these
Yeah.
days, these kids, they don't know anything. So
Right.
they
Well, I
don't they
get
don't even
that. And
understand. They didn't even understand what a man would do with a license to kill. I feel like a kid born in 2010 would never run amok and kill people
no, I would
indiscriminately
I
if
would
he was
yeah,
doing it.
I
So,
would do all kinds of mayhem with
oh,
that.
just be murder left and right. That's what
Yeah.
I would do.
No.
But only with a license.
Well, but the thing is, it wouldn't be murder. It would be, I don't know what you
No, it wouldn't
call
be.
it, but
It's not murder. It's not murder because murder is
does
unlawful
he have a
killing.
license?
So
Yeah.
we are
Love it.
certifying Doctor No,
Yeah.
the film.
Certifying Doctor No.
I
Yes.
actually was surprised that I would recommend it to everybody to go ahead and watch it. It's a pretty good one, and especially because it's the first one. You got to give something credit for being the first. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I'm going to say peace out to everybody who's been listening to Toasting the Classics.
Same here. And thank you, everyone. And well, talk to you next time.
Talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.
That's it for episode 82 of Toasting the Classics. For those playing along at home, get some Anjou wine for our guest episode on the Three Musketeers. If you'd like to get in touch, please send us an email at toastingtheclassics@gmail.com. Send us show ideas, comments, complaints, and your requests for a signed photo of Clint in his Zardoz loincloth. They're going fast. Check out my blog at theattractivenuisance.com and follow us on Twitter at @attractivenuisance. Our music was written by Michelle McArthur. See you next time on Toasting the Classics. I do not look like Ed Sheeran.
I didn't say you did.